The spotlight loved Sterling Cross, and Sterling Cross loved the spotlight even more. He was, by all accounts, a magnificent actor. His brooding good looks, his deep resonant voice, and his ability to transform into any character had made him a titan in Hollywood. He'd won awards, graced magazine covers, and had a legion of devoted fans who hung on his every word. He specialized in serious dramas, the kind that made you think, made you cry, made you appreciate the nuanced complexities of the human condition. He often played tortured artists, tormented war heroes, or brilliant but misunderstood intellectuals, and he played them all to perfection. But with all that success came a certain elevation. Sterling Cross, in his own mind, wasn't just a man, he was an institution. He saw himself as an arbiter of taste, a judge of true art. And in his judgment, much of what was popular in the world of entertainment was frankly beneath him. He disdained pop music, dismissed light-hearted comedies, and generally looked down on anything he considered fluff. He believed art should challenge, provoke, and elevate. It should not merely entertain. His latest film, The Solitary Mind, had just opened to rave reviews. It was a complex psychological thriller about an alienated philosophy, with his usual intensity, losing himself in the character's intellectual struggles and existential angst. Critics called it a masterpiece, and whispers of another Academy Award nomination were already swirling. He was on top of the world, feeling invincible, and perhaps a little too comfortable in his ivory tower. Tonight, Sterling was the guest of honor on the Late Night Dialogue, one of the most prestigious talk shows on television. The host, a smooth, quick-witted man named Arthur Vance, knew how to make his guests shine, and Sterling Cross always shone brightest. The set was bathed in a warm, inviting glow, the live studio audience buzzing with anticipation. As Sterling walked out to thunderous applause, he gave a practiced, humble wave, though inside he knew he deserved every bit of it. He settled into the plush armchair, adjusting his expensive suit jacket. Vance began with the usual congratulations, praising The Solitary Mind and Sterling's incredible performance. Sterling nodded, accepting the compliments with a regal air. He spoke eloquently about the craft of acting, the importance of artistic integrity, and the need for meaningful storytelling in a world increasingly distracted by superficiality. He was in his element, holding court, his words resonating with intellectual authority. Mr. Cross, Arthur Vance leaned forward, his smile friendly but with a hint of mischiation of the arts, particularly those with a certain gravitas. What do you make of the current cultural landscape? Do you find it lacking in substance these days? Sterling paused, stroking his chin thoughtfully. This was his cue, his opportunity to opine, to deliver one of his famous, slightly critical but undeniably profound insights. He glanced out at the audience, then back at Vance, a subtle smirk playing on his lips. It's become less about genuine expression and more about manufactured appeal, about a catchy beat and a pretty face. He paused for effect, letting his words hang in the air. The audience murmured, some nodding in agreement, others perhaps wondering where he was going with this. Vance chuckled. Pretty face, you say? Are you perhaps referring to any specific individuals, Mr. Cross? Sterling's smirk widened. He knew exactly what Vance was hinting at. The era was dominated by a few larger-than-life figures, and one name more than any other epitomized the kind of superficial appeal Sterling so vehemently dismissed. He took a slow sip of water from the glass beside him, savoring the moment. He was about to deliver a statement that would undoubtedly grab headlines. He considered it his duty, his artistic responsibility, to speak such truths. The world needed to hear it, even if it stung. He leaned closer to the microphone, his eyes twinkling with a superior gleam. The stage was set for an insult that would echo far beyond the studio walls. The lights seemed to intensify as Sterling Cross leaned into the microphone, his expression one of confident disdain. Arthur Vance watched him, a slight, expectant smile playing on his lips. The studio audience held its breath, sensing a pronouncement was about to be made. "Well," Arthur Sterling began, his voice dripping with mock sincerity, "I wouldn't want to single anyone out unfairly, but when you speak of pretty faces dominating the landscape of what is loosely called music today, one can't help but think of the phenomena, shall we say, like Elvis Presley." Some gasped. A few nervous titters could be heard, quickly hushed by the sheer audacity of the statement. Attacking Elvis Presley was like insulting a national monument. Sterling, unfazed, continued, his voice growing more theatrical, more dismissive. "No, I understand the man has a certain appeal for a particular demographic. I suppose the gyrations, the sneer, the hair, it certainly captivated millions. But let's be brutally honest, shall we?" He looked directly into the camera as if addressing the entire nation. "Is it art? Is it music that will stand the test of time? Or is it merely spectacle? A calculated performance designed to elicit screams from teenage girls and sell records based on charisma?" He took another dramatic pause, allowing his words to sink in. "There is no depth, no nuance, no real connection to the human experience beyond the most superficial level of feeling good. He sings about hound dogs and blue suede shoes. For goodness sake, where's the introspection? Where's the soul's searching?" He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "If you ask me, the man peaked when he first burst onto the scene with that. It's just a well-oiled machine churning out the same product designed for mass consumption and immediate gratification. It's the artistic equivalent of fast food. Fills you up, but offers no real nourishment. Arthur Vance, ever?" The diplomat offered a hesitant smile. "Strong words, Mr. Cross. Many would argue that Elvis Presley has revolutionized music, inspired countless artists, and created a unique sound that resonates deeply with people. They look for poetry, for truth, for the kind of emotional complexity that can only be found in, dare I say, real music. Not simply popular jingles." He sat back, a smug look of satisfaction on his face, as if he had just delivered a profound philosophical treatise that would enlighten the masses. He genuinely believed he was speaking truth to power, exposing the superficiality of popular culture. He expected some backlash, perhaps, but mostly he anticipated applause from those who considered themselves intellectuals, those who understood true art. The audience, however, was mostly stunned into silence. Some looked uncomfortable, others openly disapproving. The applause when Vance finally cut to a commercial break was noticeably subdued, mixed with a few murmurs of discontent. The next morning, Sterling Cross's words were splashed across every newspaper, amplified on every radio station. Cross calls Presley pedestrian's Bileshrow. Apter slams The King O.F. Rock A&D roll. The headlines were sensational, exactly as Sterling had intended. He read them over his morning coffee, a triumphant smile on his face. Let the public debate. He had spoken his mind, and in his estimation he had done the world a service. He had dared to say what he believed to be the truth, no matter how unpopular. He saw it not as an insult, but as an honest critical assessment. He was, after all, Sterling Cross, a man of great artistic integrity. What could a mere king of rock and roll do to counter such a pronouncement from a true artist? The California sun was warm, but a chill seemed to settle over Elvis Presley as he sat by the pool listening to Joe Esposito read aloud from the morning newspaper. They were at a rented house in Beverly Hills, a brief respite from touring, a chance for Elvis to relax with his closest friends, his Memphis Mafia. The air should have been light, filled with laughter and the splash of water, but Joe's voice had grown tense, his face darkening with each word. A glorified high-energy sideshow act. Joe quoted, his voice tight with anger. He's little more than a musical impersonator of himself at this point. Isn't he a flashy suit and a wiggle, repeating the same tired formula, Joe crumpled the newspaper in his hand, his jaw clenched. That no-good, arrogant son of a gun. Who does Sterling Cross think he is talking about you like that? Lamar Fike, stretched out on a nearby lounge chair, sat bolt upright. Sideshow act. I'll sideshow him. What a nerve. Doesn't he know who he's talking about? Lamar was already halfway to his feet, ready to defend his friend's honor with his fists if necessary. Elvis sat motionless for a moment, his blue eyes distant, staring at the shimmering water. He'd heard of Sterling Cross, of course, knew he was a big-shot actor known for his serious roles. Elvis respected talent. No matter, he usually paid little mind to what critics or other celebrities said about him. He had learned long ago that opinions were like noses. Everyone had one, but this felt different. This was personal, a dismissive sneer at his entire career, his very being. A flicker of hurt crossed Elvis's face, quickly masked. He closed his eyes for a second, a deep breath filling his lungs. When he opened them, the hurt was gone, replaced by a quiet dignity. "Calm down, boys," he said, his voice softer than usual but firm. "It's just words. Just words." Joe exploded, tossing the crumpled paper aside. "He called your music fast food. He said you had no depth, no soul searching. He basically said you're a fraud." Elvis slowly pushed himself up, walking to the edge of the pool. He looked out at the city sprawling below, the endless stretch of Hollywood where dreams were made and shattered every day. "He's entitled to his opinion, I reckon," Elvis said, though the words felt hollow even to him. "Entitled to be wrong," Lamar grumbled. "We should put out a statement. Colonel's gonna be furious. We should tell the world exactly what you think of his acting." Elvis turned, a faint, almost sad smile touching his lips. And what would that accomplish Lamar? More anger, more headlines. Would it change his mind or just stir up more trouble? He knew his friends were loyal, their anger a testament to their love for him. But Elvis had always tried to live by a different code. His mother Gladys had taught him humility, kindness, and to treat everyone with respect, no matter their station. That lesson had stayed with him even as he became the biggest star in the world. He was still the boy from Tupelo, Mississippi, who just loved to sing. "He's a serious actor, isn't he?" Elvis mused, almost to himself. "Plays all those deep, heavy roles. Maybe he just doesn't understand what my music is all about, or what it means to the people who listen to it. He don't gotta understand it to respect it." Joe interjected. "Respect you? He got up there on national TV and disrespected you something fierce." Elvis nodded slowly. "Yeah, he did, and that's his choice. But it don't mean I gotta sing to his level. My mama always told me, Elvis, always take the high road. Don't let bitterness get a hold of you. It'll eat you up inside." He looked at his friends who were still bristling with indignation. They ain't screaming because of a glorified sideshow. They're screaming because they feel something, because the music touches them. And that's what matters to me. Despite his calm words, the hurt lingered beneath the surface. He thought about the long nights, writing songs, the exhaustion of touring, the endless hours perfecting his craft, the genuine passion he poured into every performance. To have it all reduced to a wiggle and a flashy suit by someone who seemed to have no understanding of joy or connection outside of intellectual anguish. It was a bitter pill, but Elvis was a king not just of rock and roll, but of his own emotions. He would find a way to respond, not with anger, but with something far more powerful. He just wasn't sure what that was yet. The news of Sterling Cross's insult spread like wildfire, carried by every major newspaper, radio broadcast, and gossip column across the nation. The public reaction was immediate and ferocious. Elvis Presley's fans, a loyal and passionate army, rose up in a wave of indignation. Telegrams flooded network offices demanding apologies. Letters poured into fan clubs and record labels, many of them blistering condemnations of Sterling Cross's arrogance. Radio call-in shows became impromptu forums for fans to vent their fury, showering praise on Elvis and vitriol on the pompous actor. How dare he? One woman screamed into her phone on a popular radio show, "Elvis brings joy to millions. Who is Sterling Cross to judge what art is? He just makes people depressed with his dreary movies." Another fan, a young man, chimed in, "Elvis is a true artist. He connects with people in a way that Cross could only dream of. His music makes you feel alive. What does Cross do? Make you feel dead?" Even outside the hardcore fan base, many found Sterling Cross's remarks snobbish and elitist. He had misjudged the depth of Elvis's connection with the average American. He thought he was speaking to an intellectual elite, but he had inadvertently insulted the taste of millions. At the offices of Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's manager, the phones were ringing off the hook. Colonel, a shrewd and calculating man, initially saw the whole thing as a publicity stunt, albeit an uninvited one. Any publicity was good publicity, right? The sheer volume of negative feedback directed at Sterling Cross and the outpouring of support for Elvis made him reconsider. This was an opportunity. "Elvis, we need to issue a strong statement," the colonel boomed over the phone, his voice like a steamroller. A firm rebuttal. "We hit him back, and we hit him hard. Remind him who the king is. We remind him of the millions of records, the sold-out shows, the legend." Elvis, back at Graceland, was sitting quietly in his study, a stack of fan letters spread out before him. He'd read dozens, each one expressing love, support, and outrage on his behalf. He felt a deep warmth, seeing how much his music meant to people, how many lives it touched. It reaffirmed his belief in what he did. "No," Colonel Elvis said softly into the phone. "We're not going to do that," the colonel sputtered. "What do you mean?" "No, this man has insulted you, Elvis. He's questioned your very artistry. You can't let that stand." "And what good would it do to fight fire with fire?" Elvis countered. "It just creates a bigger blaze, burns everyone up." "That ain't my way, Colonel. My way is to let the music speak, to let my actions speak." "Actions? What actions?" the colonel demanded, exasperated. "You want to sing Hound Dog at his doorstep? What kind of action do you have in mind?" Elvis smiled faintly. "I ain't quite sure yet, Colonel, but it's got to be something that shows who I am. Not who he says I am, something that shows what my music is about, not what he thinks it is." Picked up a letter from a young girl who wrote that his music had helped her through a tough time. "He talks about soul searching. Well, for some folks, my music is their soul searching. It's comfort, it's escape, it's joy. It ain't always got to be a philosophy lesson to be important." He said I lacked depth. Maybe he just needs to see what kind of depth I got, the kind that comes from the heart, not just the head. The colonel sighed, clearly frustrated, but knowing better than to push Elvis too hard when he was resolute. "All right, Elvis, you think on it, but we can't let this slide. Your fans are demanding a response. The public expects one, and if you're not going to hit him back, you better figure out a way to shut him up for good." Elvis hung up the phone. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes scanning the titles of the books on his shelf. Philosophy, religion, history, spiritual texts. He wasn't just a singer. He was a man who thought deeply, who searched for meaning, who understood the complexities of life far beyond hound dogs and blue suede shoes. Sterling Cross's words had indeed stung, not because he doubted himself, but because they revealed such a profound misunderstanding. He didn't want to prove Cross wrong with anger or a public feud. He wanted to prove him wrong with grace. He wanted to show him that true artistry wasn't just about intellectual complexity, but about genuine connection, about reaching out and touching the hearts of millions and giving them something real. The question was, how? The phone call came a week later, cutting through the usual hustle and bustle of Graceland. It was from the producers of The Spotlight Hour, a new prime-time television special known for its in-depth interviews with major cultural figures. Unlike the late-night dialogue, which was more about quick wit and celebrity banter, The Spotlight Hour aimed for thoughtful, revealing conversations. Mr. Presley, the executive producer, a smooth-talking woman named Eleanor Vance, no relation to Arthur Vance, but just as astute, said over the phone, "We've been following the recent discourse between yourself and Mr. Sterling Cross. It's generated quite a buzz, and we believe the public deserves to hear your perspective." Colonel Parker, who was on the line as well, immediately saw the opportunity. "Our perspective is that Mr. Cross is a pompous windbag who knows nothing about music or the common man," he declared, ready for a fight. Eleanor chuckled politely. "Colonel, we understand the sentiment, but our show isn't about mudslinging. It's about revealing the truth behind the headlines. We'd like to invite Mr. Presley to be our sole guest for a full hour fought, no other guests, just him, and a conversation about his career, his music, his life, and perhaps how he feels about the recent comments." Elvis, listening intently, felt a stirring of something beyond just strategic opportunity. This wasn't about a quick comeback on a talk show. This was a chance to present himself truly to the world, a chance to show the man behind the legend the depth that Sterling Cross claimed he lacked. "What do you say, Elvis?" The colonel pressed his voice lower, more coaxing. "Prime time, millions watching, a chance to set the record straight your way." Elvis took a moment. He thought about Sterling Cross's words, pedestrian, sideshow, no depth. He thought about the fans, their unwavering loyalty, their hurt on his behalf. He knew he couldn't respond with anger. He had to respond with something that would transcend the insult, something that would prove Sterling Cross wrong without ever directly attacking him. He had to show, not tell. "I'll do it," Elvis finally said, his voice calm and resolute. The colonel practically crowed with delight. "Excellent. We'll negotiate the terms, Eleanor, and we'll make sure Elvis gets the platform he deserves." Eleanor sounded pleased. "Wonderful. We'll send over the details. We're thinking 2 weeks from now to give us time for promotion. We truly believe this will be a pivotal moment." After the call, Joe Esposito and Lamar Fike were still skeptical. "You're really just gonna talk, Joe asked, a worried frown on his face. "You ain't gonna give him a piece of your mind." "My mind ain't full of pieces," Joe Elvis replied, a faint smile playing on his lips. "It's full of a whole lot of things, and I plan to share some of them." "But what about that Cross fella?" Lamar pressed. "He deserves to be put in his place." Elvis walked over to the window, looking out at the sprawling grounds of Graceland. "He already is Lamar, in his own mind anyway. My job ain't to put him in his place. My job is to show the world my place, and my place is with the people, with the music, with the truth of what I do." He knew the show would undoubtedly bring up Sterling Cross's comments. It was the elephant in the room, but he wouldn't let it define his appearance. He would prepare not for a fight, but for a revelation. He would talk about his humble beginnings, about the spiritual connection he felt to his music, about the profound joy he received from performing for his fans. He would talk about how his music, for all its perceived simplicity, was a reflection of real emotions, real life, real struggles, and real triumphs. He spent the next few days in quiet reflection. He revisited old recordings, listened to gospel music, reread passages from his favorite spiritual books. He wasn't planning a speech. He was planning a conversation from the heart. He wanted to articulate the depth of his passion, the meaning behind the flashy suit and the wiggle. He wanted to show that his connection with his audience wasn't just about showmanship, but about soul. The challenge wasn't just to respond, but to elevate, to turn a negative public spat into a moment of genuine understanding and connection. He knew it wouldn't be easy, The media would be looking for fireworks. But Elvis intended to deliver something far more memorable. An act of grace that would leave the world, and especially Sterling Cross, utterly speechless. He wasn't just preparing for a TV show, he was preparing for a defining moment in his public life. The 2 weeks leading up to the spotlight hour were a blur of preparations, though not in the way many expected. Colonel Parker was in a frenzy, negotiating contracts, arranging publicity stills, and making sure every detail is ironed out for the broadcast. He wanted Elvis to look impeccable, to sound powerful, to deliver a performance that would leave no doubt about his undisputed reign. He even suggested a few zingers for Elvis to use in response to Sterling Cross, but Elvis gently yet firmly refused. Colonel Elvis explained, sitting across from him in his office, leafing through a stack of proposed questions from the show's producers. This ain't about proving him wrong with words. It's about proving him wrong by just being myself, by talking about what's real to me. The Colonel, ever practical, sighed. But Elvis, the public expects a retort. They expect you to stand up for yourself. And I will, Elvis replied, looking up, his eyes serious. Standing up for myself doesn't mean tearing someone else down. It means showing what I stand for, what I believe in. He spent hours with his band, not necessarily rehearsing new songs, but revisiting old ones, talking about the emotions behind them. He wanted to feel the music deeply, to communicate its essence. He worked with his wardrobe team, choosing an outfit that was elegant yet authentic, something that spoke of his personal style, not just the flashy stage persona. He decided on a simple, well-tailored dark suit, sharp but understated. A subtle nod to the seriousness of the conversation ahead. More importantly, Elvis spent a great deal of time in quiet contemplation. He revisited his childhood in Tupelo, the poverty, the solace he found in gospel music, the boundless love of his mother. He thought about the moment he first picked up a guitar, the raw, almost spiritual connection he felt to the sounds he could create. He remembered the early days driving from town to town, performing for anyone who would listen, the pure joy of making music. He remembered the fear, the doubt, the constant struggle to stay true to himself amidst a whirlwind of fame. Sterling Cross's words had cut deep, not because Elvis doubted his own talent, but because they misrepresented his core being. No depth, Cross had said. Elvis knew that was profoundly untrue. His life was steeped in depth, in struggle, in faith, in the relentless pursuit of connection. He also considered Sterling Cross himself. Elvis tried to understand, not from a place of anger, but from empathy. Maybe Cross genuinely believed what he said. Maybe he saw art only through a very narrow lens, one that didn't allow for the raw emotion and accessible joy that Elvis's music offered. Perhaps Cross was just insecure, needing to belittle others to elevate himself. Elvis, for all his fame, had always wrestled with his own insecurities, and that understanding gave him a unique perspective. He knew that the greatest strength wasn't in fighting back, but in being unshakably himself. He discussed the upcoming interview with his inner circle, his Memphis Mafia. Joe Esposito and Lamar Fike were still itching for a fight, but Elvis's quiet resolve began to influence them. "Look, boys," he told them one evening, "it's easy to get mad, it's easy to want to lash out, but what does that solve? It just means I become like him, and I ain't him. I'm me, and I got to trust that me is enough." He envisioned the interview not as a battlefield, but as a stage for understanding. He would articulate his philosophy on music, on life, on connecting with people. He would speak from the heart, not from a script. He would emphasize the shared human experience, the emotions that music could unlock, regardless of genre or intellectual complexity. He would speak of joy, of sorrow, of hope, of the simple pleasure of a melody that made you want to dance or sing along. He wasn't preparing a clever retort, he was preparing an honest reflection. He was preparing to show the world the man behind the myth, the soul behind the showman. He knew that if he could do that, the words of Sterling Cross would simply fade into the background. drowned out by the undeniable truth of Elvis Presley. He was ready to face the spotlight, not with defiance, but with an open heart. The night of the spotlight hour felt different. The air in the studio was electric, thick with anticipation. Everyone knew why Elvis Presley was there. While the show's producers had promised a broad interview, the unspoken subtext, fueled by weeks of media frenzy, was clear. This was Elvis's chance to respond to Sterling Cross. Outside, a crowd had gathered, an excited, loyal throng of fans, hoping to catch a glimpse of the king. Inside the studio audience was a mix of devoted followers, curious onlookers, and media representatives, eager to report on every word. The set of The Spotlight Hour was menaced, designed to put the focus squarely on the guest. Comfortable armchair, a small table with a glass of water, and a warm, inviting backdrop. No flashing lights, no elaborate stage props, just a quiet intensity. As the show's theme music swelled and then faded, the host, a thoughtful and respected journalist named Sarah Jennings, appeared. She was known for her probing but fair questions, her ability to get to the heart of an issue without resorting to sensationalism. "Good evening," Sarah began, her voice calm and measured. "Tonight we have a very special guest, a man whose name is synonymous with music, charisma, and an enduring legacy. He rarely grants such extensive interviews, and we are honored to have him here to share his story, his thoughts, and his unique perspective on a career that has touched millions of lives. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the one and only Elvis Presley." The applause was thunderous, an outpouring of genuine affection. Elvis walked out, looking every inch the icon, yet radiating a quiet confidence that was disarming. He was dressed in the dark tailored suit he had chosen, looking elegant and composed. He offered a small, sincere smile and a wave, then settled into the armchair. His posture relaxed. Sarah began with questions about his early life, his musical influences, the ground-breaking moments of his career. Elvis spoke thoughtfully, his southern accent gentle, his eyes twinkling as he recounted anecdotes from his youth, about his time in the army, about the evolution of his sound. He spoke of his love for gospel music, his admiration for blues artists, and the pure joy he felt whenever he sang. He talked about the immense pressure of fame, the challenges of staying true to himself, and the incredible bond he felt with his fans. "They're more than just an audience," he explained, his voice softening. "They're like family. They've been with me through thick and thin. And when I'm on stage, it's not just me singing. It's like we're all experiencing something together. That's the real magic." Sarah listened intently, guiding the conversation with a subtle grace, but everyone in the studio knew what was coming. The elephant in the room, the question about Sterling Cross. Finally, after nearly 40 minutes, Sarah leaned forward, her expression shifting slightly. "Elvis," she began, her voice taking on a more serious tone, "you're known for your incredible resilience and your dignified silence in the face of criticism, but recently there have been some very public and rather shy formants." Sterling Cross, wherever he was likely watching, eager to see if Elvis would finally break his silence with a fiery retort. This was it, the moment of confrontation. Sarah continued, "He described your work as pedestrian. A subtle pour, a simile, defeatus." The world held its breath, waiting for the king of rock and roll to finally unleash his fury. But Elvis had something else in mind. He had prepared for this moment not with a weapon, but with an open heart. Elvis took a deliberate pause, letting the weighty silence hang in the air. Camera zoomed in, slightly capturing the quiet dignity on his face. He didn't fidget, didn't show a flicker of anger or defensiveness. His blue eyes, usually so expressive on stage, held a deep, unreadable calm. "Well," Sarah, Elvis began, his voice soft, almost a murmur but clear enough for every microphone to pick up. "Mr. Sterling Cross is a mighty talented actor. I've seen some of his pictures and he certainly knows his craft." The unexpected compliment seemed to take the host and indeed the entire studio by surprise. A ripple of quiet astonishment went through the audience. This wasn't the fiery rebuttal anyone expected. "Everyone's entitled to their opinion," Elvis continued, his gaze direct and sincere. "And Mr. Cross, he's certainly entitled to his. He sees art in a certain way, a way that makes you think, makes you dig deep into your soul." He paused, a gentle smile touching his lips. "And that's a good thing. The world needs all kinds of art." He leaned forward slightly, his posture still relaxed, or to feel like they ain't alone in their sadness. His voice grew more reflective, almost poetic. "My music, Sarah, it ain't always about asking big philosophical questions. Sometimes it's about giving comfort. It's about letting people know it's okay to dance, to cry, to shout for joy. It's about connecting with that simple, honest feeling in their heart." He looked directly into the camera as if speaking to Sterling Cross himself, but without a trace of accusation. "I never set out to be anything more than a singer. If my music brings a smile to someone's face, if it helps them through a tough time, if it makes them feel alive, then I reckon that's a pretty good purpose. That's a kind of depth too, isn't it? The depth of human connection." He shrugged slightly. I'm just a man who tries his best every performance. I don't pretend to be an intellectual giant. I'm just Elvis. And if that's pedestrian to some folks, well, then I guess I'm happy to be walking that road, walking it with millions of other folks right alongside me." He concluded with a quiet, powerful statement. "Mr. Cross wants soul-searching. My music for a lot of people is soul-searching. It's a search for joy, for belonging, for a little bit of magic in a sometimes tough world, and if he can't find that in what I do, then maybe he's just looking for the wrong kind of soul." A silence descended upon the studio. It wasn't the nervous silence from before. It was a stunned, almost reverent quiet. No anger, no defensiveness, just profound humility, grace, and an undeniable truth that resonated far deeper than any insult. Sarah Jennings, the experienced host, found herself momentarily speechless, her planned follow-up questions suddenly irrelevant. The audience too was mesmerized. The king hadn't fired back with a verbal assault. He had responded with pure, unadulterated class, a comeback that was disarmingly gentle yet utterly devastating in its quiet power. Somewhere, Sterling Cross was watching, and he, like everyone else, was absolutely speechless. The silence in the studio stretched for a beat longer than usual, a testament to the profound impact of Elvis's words. Sarah Jennings, a seasoned professional, finally managed to compose herself a look of genuine admiration in her eyes. She leaned forward, not to press him, but to acknowledge the weight of what he had just said. "Elvis," she said softly, almost a whisper, "that was truly remarkable." Then, as if a dam had burst, the studio erupted. It wasn't just applause. It was a standing ovation, a roar of approval that swelled from every corner of the room. People were on their feet, cheering, some even wiping away tears. It was a visceral reaction, not just to a celebrity's grace, but to the sheer humanity of his response. He hadn't just defended himself. He had articulated the very essence of why his music mattered to so many. He had connected with their hearts, just as he always did. Meanwhile, miles away in the lavish living room of his Hollywood Hills mansion, Sterling Cross sat frozen. The television screen still showed Elvis calm and composed, accepting the thunderous applause. Sterling had been watching, an arrogant smirk on his face, waiting for the expected explosion, the angry retort, the defensive justification. He was ready to scoff, to dismiss it as expected rock star theatrics, but none of that happened. Instead, Elvis had spoken with such quiet dignity, such disarming humility, that Sterling felt a cold wave wash over him. "Mighty talented actor," Elvis had said. Sterling Cross, the master of dramatic interpretation, felt a sudden visceral jolt of shame. He had expected a fight, And Elvis had given him grace. He had expected a show. And Elvis had shown him soul. That line, delivered with gentle sadness rather than anger, hit Sterling like a physical blow. It was so unexpected, so utterly profound in its simplicity. It stripped away all his intellectual posturing, all his carefully constructed layers of superiority. For a man who prided himself on understanding the human condition, he realized with a sickening lurch that he had utterly failed to understand Elvis Presley. He had dismissed Elvis as a commercial product, a shallow entertainer, but Elvis had just revealed himself as a man of immense depth, humility, and genuine connection to the human spirit. Sterling had tried to be witty, biting, and superior. Elvis had responded with truth, warmth, and an unwavering kindness that made Sterling's own words feel small, petty, and incredibly arrogant. The phone began to ring, but Sterling didn't move. He felt a profound sense of humiliation, not because Elvis had won, but because Elvis had simply been. And in his being, he had exposed the hollowness of Sterling's own pronouncements. He had judged and been judged in return, not by an angry celebrity, but by his own conscience. The public reaction was swift and decisive. The next day's headlines were a complete reversal. The King. OF class. Elvis's humble comeback silences. Critics. Presley's grace redefines artistry. The tide had turned completely. Fans hailed Elvis as a true gentleman, a man of unparalleled dignity. Even some of Sterling's own intellectual admirers found themselves nodding in reluctant agreement, admitting Elvis had delivered a master class in humility. Sterling Cross saw the headlines. He saw the shift. His phone rang incessantly, with calls from his agent, from interview requests he now dreaded. The world was celebrating. Elvis's grace, and Sterling was left in the uncomfortable silence of his own making. He had aimed to diminish Elvis, but in doing so he had only diminished himself. The insult had boomeranged, leaving him the master of words, truly speechless and utterly adrift in a sea of his own self-reflection. In the days and weeks that followed the spotlight hour, Elvis Presley's humble comeback resonated far beyond the immediate headlines. It wasn't just a win in a celebrity spat. It was a powerful statement about character, about grace, and about the true meaning of connection. His words became a talking point in schools and homes, and even in the quiet corners of intellectual discourse. They served as a reminder that true strength often lay not in aggression, but in dignity. For Elvis, life continued much as it had before, but with a renewed sense of purpose. The outpouring of love from his fans was even greater, if that was possible. They saw him not just as their king, the performer, but as a man of genuine integrity, someone who truly embodied the values he often sang about. Continued to tour, to record, to connect with audiences, his performances imbued with an even deeper emotional resonance. He knew his music wasn't just entertainment. It was a lifeline, a shared experience, and that knowledge fueled him. As for Sterling Cross, the immediate aftermath was difficult. His public image, once unblemished by anything other than critical acclaim, was now tainted by a perceived arrogance and snobbery. The media, which had reveled in his initial insult, now reveled even more in his discomfort. He found himself fielding questions about Elvis in nearly every interview, no longer able to dismiss the topic. He tried at first to deflect, to intellectualize, but Elvis's simple, heartfelt words had stripped away his usual rhetorical defenses. One evening, months later, Sterling Cross was a guest on a different talk show, one that gently prodded him on the top. He sat there looking a little older, a little less self-assured. When the host finally brought up Elvis Presley, Sterling took a deep breath. "You know," Sterling said, his voice surprisingly subdued, "I said some things about Mr. Presley a while back that, looking back, I regret I was caught up in my own ideas about what art should be. And I realize now I was missing something essential. It's also about heart, about touching lives in a way that my films, for all their complexity, sometimes don't. It wasn't a full apology, not in the traditional sense, but it was a public acknowledgement. A clear shift. It was the best Sterling Cross could offer. A quiet recognition of his own misjudgment. He even admitted hesitantly that he'd since listened to more of Elvis's music, not with a critical ear, but with an open mind, and found a richness he hadn't perceived before. The experience undeniably changed Sterling Cross, making him a little less arrogant, a little more empathetic. His subsequent roles subtly reflected this shift, displaying a newfound warmth, a deeper understanding of human vulnerability. The story of the actor who insulted Elvis in the King's humble comeback became a legend in itself. It was retold in fan clubs, in biographies, and passed down through generations of fans. It wasn't just a tale of two celebrities. It was a story about the power of grace, the enduring strength of humility, and the true measure of a person's character. Elvis Presley had always been the king of rock and roll, celebrated for his music and his charisma. But in that defining moment, he cemented another title, the King of Class. Proved that true royalty wasn't about power or fame, but about the quiet strength of character, the ability to rise above negativity and to respond to ignorance, not with anger, but with an open heart. And in doing so, he left not just an actor, but the entire world truly speechless, forever impacted by the enduring legacy of his grace.